just to understand, demand has been on the rise, and also, just to understand how will this impact, demand at the channel level, considering, the e-way bill has also been implemented, and will that have an impact in any way as to also into the movement of goods across states?
So there are two sides to it, Charlene. On one side, GST and GST-led benefits are giving a good leeway for the manufacturers to not increase the prices because the rates have been cut downwards. The second is because of the supply chain efficiency, which again the manufacturers can benefit out of it. These two combined can be a big lever on manufacturers' hand to go and see that the volume consumption grows for FMCG industry. But at the same time, we have to see what is happening at the overall inflation levels, which we are seeing, unfortunately, that it's on the rise. It used to be maybe about 2-3% maybe a year back. Now it is hovering around 5-6%. And that's the projection for the whole year. Now, if the inflation is also in check and is retained within 5% level, then the double benefit of this GST and inflation would really be beneficial for the entire industry, especially for the consumption growth. And what we saw is, whatever consumption growth that we have seen in the last couple of quarters, nearly 70% of that is coming because of consumption. Okay. And pricing is having a much smaller role to play there, which is a very good trend for the industry.
Okay. So coming back to pricing, your last point that you mentioned that, pricing has not been that great. But companies have actually sounded off saying that, because of rising crude and rising raw material prices, everybody's talking about taking higher price hikes going ahead. But you also mentioned that, GST will have an impact, the lower rates will have an impact, and probably, prices will not rise as much. That was in the second quarter. But the rest of the year, you think that is still going to prevail?
So inflation is something which we have to measure and see as to how does it pan across. So typically the projection for the whole year is also inflation will be CPI inflation will be in the range of 5 to 6%, which still is fine. And using that as a benchmark, we are expecting that the entire industry for the full year will be growing at 12-13%. Okay. And out of 12-13%, if maybe 70% comes from consumption, that talks about, say, 7 to 8% kind of consumption increase for a country where population is increasing at about 1% or percent plus. So that's the way we can look at the entire industry, and healthy consumption growth is good for the entire industry and manufacturers.
Okay. You talked about foods growing at a faster rate than home care and personal care. What is the reason behind that? And do we expect this to continue, considering that food holds a larger portion of the entire FMCG pie?
Yeah, so foods, as compared to personal care or household care, has got a much bigger headroom. Because when we talk about industry, we are largely talking about the branded package part of it. Now, if in the food side of FMCG, if loose converts into brand, that gives a further boost to the food segment altogether. And that's the reason why FMCG food segment always grows faster than the personal care or household care.
And so just to understand, you said that, rural has been growing at a faster pace than urban. In fact, it's close to pre-demand levels. Do we see this continuing? And also considering, you also talked about modern trade increasing, with FMCG's contribution from modern trade increasing. How will this actually play out, going ahead and taking both of these into perspective?
So in general, rural markets have got higher propensity for growth of FMCG because the headroom is higher. In rural areas, contribution of loose or unbranded is higher as compared to urban. Yes. That's where the headroom in rural areas is high, and that's the reason why rural areas typically show a higher growth pattern for FMCG industry. Now, during demonetization and GST rollout, there was some stress on the wholesale channel, because of which the rural markets were impacted in terms of offtake also. That we have seen that it has come back to the original levels. And now again, rural growth is 3 to 4% higher than the urban growth that we see in the market.
Okay. Also, can you give us the growth rates for food, personal care and for the home care category?
So like I said, foods normally grow slightly faster than the personal care and household care. And the differential could be in the range of 3 to 4%.
And also, have you noticed that there's an increase in smaller packets is there any kind of down trading by the consumer that we've noticed? Because, a lot of companies have actually, introduced smaller packaging. Is that also driving consumption, and is there an uptick there?
Yeah, so smaller packs is basically a strategy, a go-to-market strategy for inducing trial. It is to induce better reach in terms of distribution and better trial in the hands of consumers. So, and we've seen that in the last few years, this is a pretty common trend that a lot of brands are coming with lower unit packs, which has really helped both in terms of reaching to the right, say, upcountry markets and also inducing trial for the consumers for the brand.
Okay. Also, can you elaborate a little more? You've outlined a very strong growth map for this for 2018. But we're very close. The next year is election year. How do you think? And going by past data, how has demand really panned out during that time? And considering even consumption, how is it really during election season? How are you expecting it to be?
So I would say more than the election year or what is important is what is the kind of policy that is being rolled out by the government and how is it going and converting into specific actions in the market. If there are good policies which come up, so for example we talked about the minimum support price, and while we need not directly relate with that elections, but if minimum support price pans across in a good way, on one hand it would give a much better disposable income in the hands of the farmers, which is a significant chunk of the population in the country. On the other hand, it may lead to inflation. So we have to see how does it balance in the market, and that's what most of the manufacturers are also closely watching, and we are partnering with the manufacturers to see that as an industry we do much better.
Have you also noticed that a lot of general trade stores has actually over a period of time converting into modern trade stores, and has that pace gone up?
Yeah, so that's a very common phenomenon that we have seen for many years now, where the independent traditional trade stores upgrading to more like a modern trade format, and that's one reason why the modern trade overall growth is looking much higher than what the traditional trade growth is. So a lot of independent modern trade stores are coming up into the universe of modern trade, and also various actions from the manufacturers and the retailers is also boosting the modern trade growth.
Okay. Can you tell us that has this pace gone up, whether in in the last few years or probably in this year, probably say by XXX percentage that you've seen this rate go up?
See, one additional factor which has happened in the last maybe 1 year or 2 years if I see, so during demonetization when cash was not there, it induced some of the consumers who were earlier not interfacing with modern trade to go there, or a normal consumer who was shopping from both the channels because cash was not adequate in the system was tempted to go towards more of modern trade. So this was a phenomena which we saw, and if the footfall was increased because of this phenomena, and if modern trade continues to say entail customers because of various promotions and schemes and so on and so forth, it would continue to give more leverage to the modern trade channel in the coming quarters also.